Awesome.
So just to really bring us into COVID, we're now recording again.
That's it, all the way.
Perfect.
Yeah. So maybe you guys would love just to hear, your heart for this course, and how would you like to, I guess, get our time started here? I'll just turn the floor over to you.
Well, I think John, maybe a couple minutes from you, just on the kind of the high level, kind of where this all came from, and then I can talk a little bit more, Joe, like what I said to you about kind of how this fleshed out into something real, and kind of some of the ways that we could see it being fruitful in your own community, and I can even walk you through some of the pieces of it. And then I think if we just create some space for some Q&A, that's going to actually be the most valuable thing towards the latter half of the call. So so John, maybe start with you and kind of just say where this all came from in your story and context, and as a leader in New York, and then I'll take the next piece after that.
Okay, gotcha. Well, guys, I do want to just take a moment to say thanks for your faithfulness to Jesus and serving his kingdom in this time. And it's been very challenging. We're like you, our church hasn't met for 15 months in person. It's been mainly online. And, to be honest with you, I'm sick of it. But God's done a lot of pruning and a lot of good stuff in our hearts. But I genuinely do thank you for your faithfulness and just holding it down. Pastors have had a hard time, but you're the ones that have carried, really, for the most part, the pastoral burden. And anyway, I was just thinking about that verse in the book of Hebrews that says, God is not unjust. He will not forget the love that you have shown and the hospitality that you've shown towards the saints. It will be richly rewarded. So as a part of your life and legacy and ministry, just thanks for being faithful in this time. A little bit about myself, for those of you who don't know me. I'm originally from Australia, and I moved to the US 24 years ago now. So I'm actually more New York than I am Australian or American. I've been in New York City for 16 years and pastored a church in the middle of Manhattan that entire time. So in various forms, at one point, it was a mega church with thousands of people in multiple locations. At other times, it was just a network of small groups. We've been very sort of flexible on the structure and very, very disciplined on the kinds of disciples I think that we're trying to make. That's been our North Star. So this course is sort of born out of our experience of trying to give everyday followers of Jesus in the real world the tools they need to actually follow Jesus and deal with the complexities of the changing culture around us and be able to bring Jesus to bear on those realities. So we were seeing a thing where the culture was shifting so quickly, and all of the sort of, not the theology, but the practices and the tactics and all of that just sort of stopped working all of a sudden. And there was these behind the scenes philosophical and, spiritual shifts. And we just couldn't quite bridge the gap. We couldn't get Jesus to where people were. It seemed honestly like folks needed a theology or a divinity degree in sociology and apologetics just to have coffee with someone that you meet. I mean, like, the objections were just so real and so known, and so many more church leaders have failed. There's been so many more scandals, things like that, that people just, we basically saw Christianity shift from being, as Tim Keller says, weird, to being a threat. So it moved from a category where it was like, hey, if you do that, that's okay. But now it's at the point where people are like, this is dangerous. For the most part, we've got to remove it. I know the UK is a little bit different. In some ways, the UK is more secular and less secular than New York City. I've spent a lot of time in the UK, have a lot of friends in the UK, have done stuff with UK sort of churches and networks. And I'm always amazed at the apathy and resistance people have to faith there, but also how the Queen is still paying your local vicar. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's so weirdly woven in together. So it's not an exact one-on-one correlation, but I think a lot of those cultural shifts that you're feeling are things that we have felt and wrestled with. So we basically sat down and tried to ask the question, like, what are we hearing? What are we experiencing? And then how do we just like map those out and address them? So we weren't sitting in a room basically going, what are like some cool ideas for mission that we could sort of brainstorm and see what sticks? A lot of it was feedback from people on how do I address this? How do I show that mission is not basically colonization, but it's actually the distribution of God's love? How do I have conversations with people and actually connect with where they are? How do we care about justice in a way that is honoring to God? How do we show hospitality when people are riddled by fear? How do we use our jobs, which people are at every day, for the kingdom of God? So it was the felt needs of our church that we sort of basically responded to. So we did a ton of sort of reading and listening to our team, and then sort of like put this together as a resource. So we first taught it as a sermon series at our church. And I don't know if you're like this. Maybe you can't say it with the pastors on the phone, but not all sermon series are life-changing. I mean, would you agree with me? Some of them are like not bad. They're like,
I wouldn't agree at all. I think every one of our series is here.
Yeah. But some of them just have the touch of God on them, where you get the sense there's something to this. And when we gave this series at our church, and the series was called A Missional Life, it had that touch of God on it. There was resonance and response. And the number one response we got from people was gratitude, like, thank you, this is so helpful. I have God's heart, but I'm like trying to figure out how to sort of make it work in the real world. So the problem with those talks is like, I'm a long-winded preacher. I'm like 45 to 50 minutes. And we're like, most people don't have the patience to put that amount of time in. So Tyler and I basically sat down and said, how do we get these sort of practices and skills to their minimal essence, sort of around the 20-minute mark, which is sort of TED Talk-ish. And then how do we have like a discussion guide so people can really process it? So that was sort of the origin of it. I was happy enough to just give the sermons and then offer them inside of our church. But we kept hearing from people, hey, that was really helpful. It's just too long. Can you shorten it? And then we could use it. So that was sort of the origins of it. We run this at our church. We're getting ready, coming out of COVID and all of that, to like put a huge emphasis on this, just equipping people for mission, because at the end of the day, our goal is to help people encounter the love of Jesus and have their lives be transformed. That's it. And many of the things we talk about are just fueled by a desire to reach people with God's love. That's it. It's not technique. It's not just theology. It is a redeeming heart of love that makes us want to see our friends' lives transformed by Jesus. So that's a little bit about sort of the origins of it. And then during the pandemic, as it turns out, we did have moments where we had time on our hands and we're like, we can probably put this into a little course. I want to say one other thing, which no one needs more content. All the content you want is probably on YouTube or podcasts if it's just about content. So we're not trying to put this out there just so people have something to go through. We genuinely believe that we are at a missionary moment in Western culture. And we want to help churches. We want to equip churches to have an outward, skillful focus in reaching the lost. And I know that if your church tripled in the next year, but all it was people from other churches, you wouldn't be satisfied. You know as well as I do, the sweet stuff is baptizing people who are far from God and seeing them find their way back home. The sweet stuff is the prodigals coming home. The sweet stuff is lost people finding hope in Jesus. And it's amazing how many churches just collapse inward and they lose that outward focus. So our heart is to sort of help remind and push churches back into the importance of reaching people who don't belong in their church. So that's probably the last thing I'd say on that, Tyler.
Awesome. Well, that's super good vision. And yeah, we've been along. I've kind of been along for the ride with John for the last couple of years as we've done this. And yeah, our heart is just to help equip you to have a missional culture. And I guess to maybe add a few more nuances or layers, maybe from my perspective, is I really saw this course really bear a lot of leadership fruit in our community and in our congregation. And I think part of that is because in a place like New York and probably in a place like Manchester, I know it's a big urban center, we had a lot of people that were like, hey man, I'm really committed to your church, but I'm working at Google, I'm working at Goldman Sachs, I'm working on Broadway, I'm doing all this other stuff. I don't have time to come to all your volunteer meetings. I don't have time to, be at 3 services on a Sunday or whatever. And it was like, how do we validate these people and say, hey, we just want you to be a kingdom person, like out where you are, right? We want you to have, as it says in 2 Corinthians, that sense of, hey, I'm an ambassador of God's kingdom, and I've been blessed and sanctioned and sent by the community that I'm a part of, even if I'm not putting in 10 hours a week volunteering on a team or whatever. And what we found is that this really created that context of saying, hey, the goal isn't just church, right? The goal is kingdom. And I think that that was a really big category shift for a lot of people to say, hey, oh, okay. And I can go live my life and go be a Christian in public in my life. And it's funny because it's oftentimes those people that are the ones that have that kingdom identity most fully baked in. And they're the ones that are actually, creating new encounters with non-Christians and coming up with crazy ideas that weren't sanctioned by me or John. And next thing you know, there's a dinner party or a new group or a what, and there's like, it's like natural, spontaneous generation of like stuff happening. And I think it's because there's this sense of like, no, you are sent to go be a kingdom ambassador in New York City. And so that's kind of the goal and kind of been the heart of this thing for us. And then I think the second part is there's something about the idea of being missionary that can be really intimidating, like John said. And it's really easy to revert to like private individual practices like prayer, or reading the Bible or confession or whatever. But we basically wanted to take this idea and say, you can be a non-heroic, everyday, normal, don't have to have all the answers person, but still participate in the purposes of what God is doing in the world. You can still be available. You can still welcome the Holy Spirit into your world. And so we just wanted to kind of lower the bar. We wanted to raise the vision, but lower the bar. You know what I mean? Like raise the vision of being really missional in your world, but lower the barriers to entry for the average person, so that they could say, oh yeah, I can be a part of that. And so that's kind of the hope for the course. And that's part of how we structured it as well, to give people the story of God and help them understand his heart. And then to understand just the basic practices of what it means to live a kingdom life in public. So
let me just throw one other thought in there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're like us. We saw at the start of the pandemic a heroic Christian response, amazing churches rising up, loving, serving, feeding, caring, helping. And that's going to wear off at some point. British culture will move on. And I don't know if it's going to be like another royal scandal. I don't know what, I don't know if Scotland's going to nick off and do their own thing. I don't know what's going to happen. But at some point, all the credibility that's going to be gained, if it's not institutionalized into the life of the church will just collapse back inward, and the culture will move on to other topics and other crises. And we think this is a really important moment to sort of embed outward focused practices of mission and love in the hearts of God's people. So it wasn't just like a moment the church has, it's a culture of mission the church sustains, and congregations can be fruitful. Because the next wave that's coming, which is probably already where you guys are, is just like massive mental health needs. People are dealing with tremendous anxiety, depression, aloneness, and they're going to medicate that some way. And so we want followers of Jesus to be able to say, just come on in, come into our life, come into our heart, experience the good news of the gospel. So I think there is an important moment for taking the good that we've been through, embedding it so it doesn't just get lost and everybody moves on.
Sorry about that. Joe, you tell us, man, what's most helpful? We can go practical, we can go whatever you want to do, man.
It's all so good. And you've already answered some of my questions. It's huge for where we are. I think a big part of this next season for us is actually going to be the transformation of the people you're looking at right here. I'm certainly excited about getting this out into as many people in Ramp Church as possible, but I actually feel like God's wanting to do a genuine, authentic work in the core of our church in this season. And I think it's really going to start in the people who are joined here. Yeah. In us, that I want God to transform my perspective on all of this and our leaders' perspective. And then I think the long-term results of that are what I'm really excited about. So I see this as a fundamental posture shift for Ramp Church that, that, 3 months from now, the church in the UK, September is almost like the start of another year, here in the UK. I'm sure it is in the States as well, but yeah, the school year starts, and so we're going to be returning to in-person gatherings around then. So I'm seeing this a fundamental shift. So for me, it's about us getting it, and I don't even want this group to lose what could happen in us because we're trying to get through the material, if that makes sense. And so I don't even know if we're going to be able to exhaust the material in our own hearts and our own minds. I think there's going to be like one layer. And does that make sense? Yeah, it's a line upon line sort of a thing. And so there's not a question in this yet. It's more, I'm just trying to explain the journey for you guys. And if there's anything that triggers a thought that you would want to speak into, I'd love for you to do that. Go, babe.
I love what you were saying, just about how at the beginning of lockdown, there were churches just really reaching out, in the middle of a crisis. And I definitely think in Manchester, it was a really beautiful effort of lots of just incredible service to the city. And in the church, it seemed like we were gaining unbelievers and strengthening our core. And then this middle ground just completely is gone, which is, I don't know, I guess it's not good for me to say that's good, but those who just came to church on Sundays, well, now it's online, they don't have to watch it. But the people who have really, really dug in, that core has gotten stronger. And then we have these new believers as well. And so I love just the ability just to really dig deep into staying outward focused as people prepare to get back into a rhythm of in person, so we don't slip back into this then becoming okay with, just like you were saying, reaching people who are already reached and passing around church members, but keeping outward focused, but letting it go deeper understanding, really getting it not just experiential as serving the city and talking to people on the streets and volunteering and different capacities in the city, but even understanding the why behind that, I think is really going to be a great win for our church, because like Joe said, we're only 3 years old. So, and then a year and, 14 months in lockdown as well. So this is yeah, it's been a fun ride.
I'm curious, what do you feel like was for your community maybe the most difficult part of this content for them to get behind, or maybe was some of the most challenging bits to implement or to integrate into their thinking? Does that make sense? Maybe if we can identify even going into this, hey, be on the lookout for this or that sort of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was all like very, very well received. And, you're basically we basically tried to deal with like every area of Christian mission you can sort of think of. Serving the poor, evangelism, the workplace, justice, opening your home, being like Jesus, going to that. Like we basically tried to like map out where are all the areas of mission and address them. So the resistance wasn't with any of the content. I think people really appreciate it. The resistance is the resistance we're all up against, which is busy modern lives and selfishness. So, like, why do people not love and serve? You want to know why? Because they're busy and they get selfish. And, the Christian church, we are people who live for others, so to me, it's not like a little tweak. The goal is to sort of like irreparably break people's hearts for the lost and then just show them avenues to sort of lean into that based on where they are and what God has for them. Been talking about this a lot. I mean, Jesus was just radically committed to reaching people who didn't fit into the religious categories of his day. Jesus is going to the hard places. Jesus is leaving the religious to go and find the lost. Jesus is going to Samaria. Jesus is showing mercy to people who are caught in sin. I mean, it's like, this is what Jesus is about. So it's amazing how much those fundamental schedule and selfishness stop people living for Jesus. I mean, if I could sum it up, is the third soil. The third soil is what stops people really embracing this stuff. So yeah, I mean, how do you form a culture? You just stay on this thing. You talk about it again and again and again and again. So those were the biggest obstacles.
Yeah, one thing that will set you guys up for success, and this is built into the design of the course, is the first module. The very first module is called Missional Angst. And that's kind of a weird place to start, right? Like missional angst. But part of it is we wanted to create a space before people go on this journey to connect to two things. One is to the internal vision and heart and imagination for mission that everybody actually already possesses, right? Like, you don't sign up to be a Christian because you want to live a small life and do something dull and boring, right? So in everybody that's following Jesus is the embers of that missionary spirit, that zeal, that desire to step into what God is doing and his purposes. But then we recognize that there are limitations, there are blockers, there's the types of things John is talking about. And we basically are trying to give people a category or a set of categories to identify what are the things that are limiting that from making its full expression out into the world. And so there's both external challenges, whether it's cultural opposition or busyness or fear or whatever. And there's internal challenges, whether it's lack of formation, lack of equipping, all types of different stuff. And so we really wanted to start by giving people kind of a self-diagnosis framework within the first unit to say, hey, the whole point of this course is we want to help close the gap between the desire that that you have deep down and the blockers and the hindrances and the limitations that are keeping you from activating that more fully and wholly throughout your entire life. So all that to say is making sure that you really spend time on that first little bit and let people kind of internalize that for themselves will kind of set the stage for a lot of the rest of the material.
I think just two other random thoughts. One of them is, you've got to, Jesus' patience with his disciples' failure is kind of extraordinary. I mean, they were just fumbling and bumbling. They want to call down judgment on villages Jesus is trying to save. They don't want to go to the places where he is. They're afraid of the religious leaders. I mean, his patience is amazing. And so I think creating an environment where people are free to fail in their efforts, I think is very important. So sort of just like an environment of like total welcome. How did it go? And someone's like, well, it was awful. You go, you know what? That's okay. Sometimes this stuff is awful. So I think an environment of safety for failure and patience is huge. Secondly, I think trying to view it as a lot of these things are like little mini 1 week experiments you can try. So hospitality is an example. It's like, who could I just have a coffee with this week? Or maybe, grab takeout and just catch up, even if it's in a third neutral space. If you're not comfortable having someone in your home, it's see what can happen. Make them like little mini experiments in mission. And then the group can open with debriefing thoughts from last week. So, hey, did anybody have an intentional conversation? Did anybody at work this week consciously spend time offering it to God? And what did you sense the Holy Spirit saying to you? Okay, this week we talked about getting to the redemptive edge. Like, how did you consciously leave your normal rhythms and patterns to go out of your way to position yourself for Jesus' mission? And then just see what they do. The glory, the wonder, the stories, the fruit is in the doing. And I just genuinely believe that the problem is not a harvest problem, it's a laborer problem. Jesus is wanting to reach people, and he's just looking for people to join him. So giving your people like those little small wins, those little tastes, I think help people over the course of time get a larger heart for it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's beautiful. I think one of my dreams would be at the end of this posture shift that we have more stories coming in that are from our people Monday through Saturday than what happened Sunday morning, 11 to 12:15. I think that would be my dream. It's that the numbers that we share didn't happen mainly from our outreach team and our Sunday morning invitation, but it happens Tuesday morning in a boardroom. And, I think that if we can flip the stories, the pipeline that's coming into Ramp Church, that would be my dream. I love that. Look at that as 1 week experiments. That is it's beautiful. Are you catching that, Ramp Church, just to even see that journey over the next few months? I wonder, crew, if there are any just burning questions or thoughts that you wanted to contribute based on what's been shared so far. Just wanted to create some space. If not, there'll be some more space later on.
I've got a little question. I don't know if you can hear me because my Wi-Fi sucks here.
Gotcha, bro.
Can you hear me all right? I literally was just out getting pizza with a buddy of mine who I've sort of been journeying with for ages, and we talk about God stuff. He's kind of one of these like conspiracy theory types into like maybe there's aliens out there and all this kind of stuff. But I've been doing this, trying to live like a missional life with him, and like I can never quite seem to get him into the Christian framework. I don't understand how you bridge that gap. Like, I mean, he's been to some church things every now and again, but how do you take them on that journey? I don't know. Like, I don't know if you got any thoughts around that.
Well, I mean, one thing is, I think it's important to remember, you never know what's happening behind the scenes in a person's life who looks like radically disinterested, or it's like, you just never know. I mean, God's obviously working in this guy's life. The reason I know that is because you're in his life. Like you wouldn't be in it if God wasn't trying to do something for him. So number one, I'd be encouraged. Number two, maybe a little touch of prayer and fasting for some sort of breakthrough. I'm sure you've done some of that stuff. I always remember Jesus, like, this kind only comes out by prayer and fasting. Sometimes it's just really pressing in can sort of facilitate, or God can use it to sort of lift the veil a little bit. One thing, I don't know if you've tried this or whatever, but it's like getting him into the scriptures as sort of a challenge. Not the whole thing, but like, Jesus makes 7 fundamental claims about himself. It's like, would you be willing to read like 10 verses and then like, let's talk about it next week? What on earth do you think's happening here? And then you just, you're bringing the power of God's word, which is living and active, to chop up the human heart. And, Jesus, I'm the light of the world. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the bread of life. I'm the resurrection and the life. And then, what's his character? I'm gentle and lowly in heart, and sometimes some of those words just can jump in. Yeah. So I don't know if it's like, would you be willing for the next couple of weeks to just like read 10 verses and get together and talk about it or whatever, something super small and bite-sized that puts him in direct contact with God's word.
That's actually a really good idea. Yeah.
That Wi-Fi struggle just got real.
I think we lost your audio there, Nathan.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me now.
You're back.
I'm back. Okay, that's cool because we always seem to go off into these amazing abstracts. So like maybe that's a good thing of challenging him to look in the Bible. Yeah. Okay, I'll give that a go.
Thanks, Nathan.
Awesome.
Making it
one of the
ready. Go, Tyler.
Well, one of the things that is I think it's in the evangelism module, I think, but we want to kind of give people a framework, and it's very connected to Nathan, what you're saying, of just being able to kind of assess where somebody is on their spiritual journey. And there's a couple dimensions to that. One is kind of how much maybe knowledge or comprehension they would have about the gospel and the claims of Jesus and who he is and what he is. And then the second dimension is kind of how open or closed they are at kind of a heart level, to even going on that journey. And so one of the things we want to help people do is have a kind of a grid or a framework, because I guess the takeaway is that you would actually approach somebody very differently based on where they are on those spectrums. And so we just want to be people that show up into the moment where that person is, and just drop the little word or just be the person for that moment without having to carry the responsibility of taking them all the way across the finish line necessarily, unless God obviously like puts us in their life in that way. And then secondly, kind of to John's point, we think there's a really, really, really important role in the practice of praying for the lost. And so we want to make sure that that gets in there as well, that one of the only things you'll have control over is how, is what you bring before the Father in prayer. So, I think those are some of the like maybe pieces of the larger evangelism conversation, I think, that are pretty important.
So good. So good. Well, I'd love to get a bit practical with you guys and on the nuts and bolts of actually running the group time and, preparing for each session. Would love to just glean from some of what you guys have learned from running the course. So let me just explain the way we normally do. Well, at least we've done groups in lockdown, and the way we're planning on doing the course. We're meeting all on one night right now. So the way we're planning on doing this is in one centralized group space. We show the video together, and then we break out into Zoom rooms and go through the discussion guide. Of course, all of our group leaders are going to have the videos and the guide previous to the meeting. But we're even, and then each Sunday message is in many ways going to be an introduction to what your video for that week. So I'm looking to kind of end my message, or whoever's on our speaking team is speaking that Sunday, to kind of end their message where you began. And so, yeah, so our home group leaders will then be looking to prepare, for that week coming up, but we'd love for you guys to speak into that process. Maybe anything you've learned that you feel like's really worked well, or, maybe not worked so well in the practical side of this. Matt, yeah, maybe if you have critiques on that format.
No, I think I can speak to that, because we ran this group twice during COVID, Zoom only. And so I think we have a few best practices in there somewhere. So just to clarify, are all the community groups together in one digital space, or is it community group by community group separately? It's all one big digital space.
So we come together in Zoom. Our plan right now is to watch the 20-minute video, everybody at the same time, and one space. And then we're zoomed out into our little individual Zoom rooms for discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a great basic idea. I think that we ran the course with about 70 or 80 people last summer, right? As it was that like the summer of COVID, everybody had good energy and momentum, all that stuff. And so what we would basically do is, do a little bit of intro, kind of whoever the main facilitator is doing most of the talking, because to try to get group feedback when there's 50 or 60 or 70 people in a room can be a little tough. And then basically, yes, point people straight to the video. One thing you could do is actually go to a breakout at the beginning to, like John said, kind of kind of basically say, how was last week? What did you learn? How did it go? And just kind of get people talking at the beginning of the night and get their brains kind of into that mind space. And so that's not a bad idea, just to kind of create connection and create, like get people into the experience before you just turn on a video. I think that's probably like a good practice. And then the video itself, yeah, I think that's great. Everybody has their own preferences on whether you want to like show the video on the the platform altogether, or if you just want to like say, here's the link, watch the video, or whatever. But basically you watch the video, and then yeah, I would split people into groups. I found that groups of about 4 or 5 or 6 are in a Zoom space are about the right size. And so if a community group is bigger than that, you might want to split it into 2 or 3 subgroups. And then there's really only enough in a 2-hour block. There's really only enough time for probably like 2 really good discussion question times. so that people really have space to kind of like think and unpack the question and really play with it, right? Like you want to create space for, even if there's awkwardness for a minute, that's okay, because you want to create space for people to step into that awkwardness and begin to process what their thoughts are themselves. So those would be some of the practical things that I would say, and then all come back together at the end, you know, kind of just to add that larger group kind of feel. So maybe that was too practical for what you were looking for. I'm not sure, but
that's exactly the kind of stuff I was looking for. So no, it's great.
I think one other thought is making sure that as much as possible, people are in the same group. So there's like an experience of trust that develops over time. So, I mean, I don't know if there's like new people jumping in or people have been journeying for a long time together, but that shared sense of community facilitates better discussion, particularly on the sort of free to fail, like I tried, it didn't work, you know, that sort of dynamic. Yeah, and I think making sure there's a space where you talk about like, how did it go last week? Last week, we talked about missional conversations. Did anybody either map out where they think their non-believing friend is so they can develop a prayer and sort of conversation strategy, or actually just go talk to someone just like got into it? And how did it go? What did you see God do? What did you sense the Holy Spirit doing in your heart? I think getting people like reflecting on what they did is a good way to build momentum, so it doesn't just feel like all theoretical, all intellectual, all talk. Where's God been working, and where did he show up?
Yeah, it's really helpful. Did you in your course, do you show the video to everybody, or does everybody watch the video on their own time?
No, we show the video during the 2-hour group time, roughly. So kind of similar to like maybe an alpha course, if you guys have familiarity with that, where the video is actually the jumping off point for discussion. So you want it to be like kind of a shared experience during the group time.
Yeah, love it. Great stuff. Crew, any practical questions?
I was just going to ask on that point. I know you referred to the alpha video. Did you watch the video with your groups all together, from start to finish, or did you sort of stop the video and then discuss questions? Because I've noticed there's quite a few prompts and reflection points in the pack. So what would you suggest, just to watch the video all the way through, or to stop and then reflect on the relevant points?
I would encourage people to watch the video all the way through. And the PDF guide that you get is in many ways kind of just a summary of the video itself. And so that is meant to serve as kind of a kind of an extended kind of guide and map and reflection point of what the video is talking about. And so, you know, if you want people to jot down notes or write down things that are interesting to them or whatever, I think you can. But I think it's best to watch the whole video start to finish. And then the questions are designed to basically kind of hit each of the major kind of categories or each of the major points of the talk. And so, you know, some modules will have 2 questions, some modules will have 3. And you can just kind of work through those, but it logically follows the arc of the video, basically.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry. So when you were saying that it's better to focus on maybe 2 good discussion topics, which is great. You know, in terms of towards the end with the exercises, are they meant to be done on a one-to-one basis in terms of maybe on their own, or as a bit of homework or reflective practice, or how do you incorporate the exercises bit?
Yeah, the basic idea is that the questions are designed a little bit more for group discussion, and the exercises are designed a little bit more for taking home and going deeper if they want to like kind of circle back into the material during the week. And so we wanted to create some opportunities for people to go deeper on their own. And so we basically, you'll notice a lot of it is just blank space, because I think there's so much power in just asking like a really prompting kind of self-reflective question of somebody. So you can't really go wrong with it. I kind of put it in the hands of the leaders to facilitate in the direction that kind of makes the most sense in the way that the Holy Spirit is leading based on your group and the mood of the night and kind of everything else. But these are meant to be both a resource and a jumping off point for you as leaders.
Yeah, just one other thought. The goal, so one goal is to keep people on track, because people in small groups, particularly can go all over the map. So that's its own challenge. But outside of that challenge, the goal is not to, quote, work through the material. So the goal is not just about like education. So if you get on one question and there's energy on it and there's engagement and discussion, just stay on it as long as the energy's there. Don't feel like you're going to, well, there's 3 more questions we got to crank through. I think it's more like that sort of thing. So yeah, it's just like monitoring where the Spirit's moving in that particular meeting. And if you sense like we need to just stop here and lean into this and go deep on this, just do it. It's more like that. Don't feel the obligation to just sort of keep cranking through it simply because there's more content.
Who else? Anybody else?
I have more of a big picture question, if that's okay. It might take us back a bit, big picture. But I noticed when I went through the first part of the course, the angst part, is just how incredibly well you guys have taken like culture and these really abstract ideas and these problems that we're all feeling and facing, and you've put language to it and you've identified it and kind of brought it into the light and been like, this is what we all struggle with. This is what we're going to be going through, especially as missionaries, as missional life, people. So I was wondering first of all, how as Christians can we stay engaged with culture and stay above it in the sense of being able to identify what is culture, what is my own struggle, what is spiritual warfare. Like, I feel like sometimes that can get in the way of actually dealing with it if we're not able to identify it. So I guess I have 2 questions. How do we do that, and how important is it to the missional life?
Well,
30 seconds. You only have 30 seconds on this, John.
So I've been reading Blaise Pascal lately, and he basically says, until you accurately diagnose the human condition, you'll get no traction in evangelism. So to me, I'm not interested in understanding culture. I'm interested in understanding where people are so I can effectively apply the gospel to it. So the degree to which culture has moved away from our previous effective categories is the degree to which I'm interested in understanding it so I can get Jesus to respond to it. So people say to me all the time, like, I get a lot of feedback. I really appreciate how you sort of like make sense of culture. Why do you do that? I only do it for the sake of mission. It's not intellectual curiosity. I got other stuff, man. I got a busy life. I read it because if I don't help my people understand what they're experiencing and what our culture is experiencing, you can't connect the gospel to it. So it is important. And so it's important to show how the gospel both affirms the longing and pain they're experiencing and provides a different alternative. So that's the answer. In terms of an example, identity is probably the biggest example. Modern identities are self-constructed, they're fluid, and they're fragile. And often they're performative, which is what Foucault says, which means once you choose an identity, you have to perform it to maintain recognition within a group. Do you know how exhausting it is to have to invent yourself and then perform yourself, and how that can change at any given moment? Do you know how freeing it is to have a rooted identity where you're told who you really are? And when you're told, you're like, I knew it. It's like that Cinderella moment. I knew I was not bound to be a slave and to be oppressed. I knew I was destined for romance, beauty, freedom, dignity. So that's as good a news to our society right now as anything. But the only reason I want to understand how modern identity is constructed is because I'm really trying to show how much the gospel is so much better than that sort of a view. So
yeah. Can I add one thing, John? Not to add, because that's basically it. But Olivia, the average person isn't like, you start talking about like postmodernism and disenchantment and the buffered self and Foucault, and they're just like, I don't know. It's like intimidating, right? And so what's the way to like help people process all that in like a really simple way? And to me, the simplest framework for thinking through all that is just thinking about story. What story are people telling? What story are they living in? What story is the culture around us telling? And basically what Newbegin says is that the gospel is basically just a different and a better and a more true story. And we have to learn how to live out of that one instead of all the other ones that are given to us in so many other ways, right? It's like everyone's trying to sell you something, kind of an idea, and learning how to basically get a lens for interpreting that, and just slowing down long enough to say, wait a minute, what stories are we seeing competing in the public square? What stories are you seeing competing in your own heart? Is I think a good way to kind of help the average person pull apart what all those forces are that are kind of at play in the world.
Yes, one other super practical thought, Tyler. That's a great reminder. No one cares about all of that. Not only a freshman in philosophy. A first-year university student in philosophy class. Everyone else is too busy with the drama of their life. So how did Jesus do it? I think the practical application of understanding culture is by basically saying, when I grew up, my parents used to tell me that this was the thing. And when I look around the world, they tell me this is the thing. But this is what Jesus says is the thing. And I found it very, very freeing. So it's sort of like the culture says to you, morality says to you, but Jesus says to you as the good news alternative. So his approach, with the woman at the well was just like, basically, how's that working for you? The multiple husbands, how's that going? I got something better. I got living water. And she's like, sir, give me the water to drink. And he's like, you're looking at it, drink up, So to me, those one-on-one, how's that actually working out for you? And if someone says it's working fantastic, you just go, great, tell me more about that. But that it's at its best temporary, because you were designed for life with God, and life apart from God is going against the grain of your design. Even if you medicate it, blur it out, blot it out, fill it with pleasure, deep, deep, deep in the inner person is that longing for God. So.
Oh, brilliant.
It's awesome. Great question,
Oh,
Liz.
incredible. Yes. Anybody else? Other questions? Go, Pete.
Hi, so I'm Pete. So I guess one of the points that I've come across while I'm going through the study and looking at it is I typically like Bible studies that ask me the simple questions, like how many disciples were there and how many loaves of fishes. That's where I'm at. So when I get reflective questions that take me 3 hours to work out, I'm sat there thinking, how on earth am I going to do this in a group session for a short answer? So it is hugely reflective. And I just wanted to just sort of ask, how does that play out with people? Especially, I'm going to help running a group of men who are going to be struggling just to even open their mouth sometimes. But how does that reflection, certainly on the questions, has it played out with your experiences? And not so much an instant thing. Can we expect that to be stuff that's coming out throughout the week and actually encouraging that discussion through WhatsApp and things like that? Because I'm suspecting a lot of the guys, a lot of the people, if they're like me, heck, oh dear, there's going to be a lot of reflection, and we're not going to get instant answers for some of these because they are very deep, fundamental areas for people to look at.
Yes,
that was into the question.
I would just say adjust it to the audience that you have. So if you're like, hey, that's not going to work, don't use it then. Just like write a simpler question. You know what I mean? Don't feel pressure. Maybe you are like, I do feel pressure to translate it. Well, maybe that's your job as the group leader. But don't feel the pressure to try and like have a discussion that's not going to work. We're like pragmatists when it comes to facilitating stuff. It's like, if it's not working, don't do it. Change it, modify it, make it work. From our end, I mean, gosh, feel super empowered to tweak it so it hits home,
But do you find that there is a lot of reflection in this stuff, that it is stuff that people actually do, not just into the session, but actually throughout the week, that actually people are still churning this over? It's not something they deal with on an evening and then they park and may do the exercises. Actually, you do actually find that because they are such reflective or searching questions that people are actually reflecting on it through the group and actually working through it. Instead of just doing it on the night, they're actually spending the week going through it because they are quite fundamental questions. Have you experienced that people develop as they go through on those times?
Yeah. So John, I guess what I would say to that is one of the things we tried to do in order to kind of find the sweet spot between it being deep and complex, but also being really simple and accessible, is we tried to make sure that each week had just like a really clear topic, right? So this week is about God. This week is about identity. This week is about evangelism. This week is about justice. And so what that allows you to do is all you have to do is if you really want to pour into these guys, just keep the chat going and let them talk about whatever their thoughts are on the topic, kind of as much as they want. You don't have to, I guess, to John's point, force a complicated question on it. But you have the opportunity as a group leader, keep the chat going through the week. If you want, and say, hey guys, this week we're talking about evangelism. This week we're talking about justice. This week we're talking about hospitality. And you can keep it at that high level. And I still think people will get a lot of value out of it just because of the nature of kind of the life of the group, Okay,
thank you.
I definitely empathize. I'm a high school dropout. I did an apprenticeship as a butcher, super working class, multi-generational housing estate, violent poverty is my background. And trying to have discussions with those people about Jesus, faith, but I do have a conviction that underneath the communication or lack of communication, particularly with men have sadness and frustration, and being able to open the door to let it sort of to create an environment of trust where it can be drawn out. I think you can do that with a well-placed question. Why does it seem so hard? Or what have you seen where your mates at work just have got angry at God? Just little questions that draw on their experience and their world. So here's what they are. They're experts in their world. They may not be experts in the world of the Bible or mission or church, but if someone's doing a delivery route or someone's working, as a consultant, they have figured out how to maintain a job. They're probably pretty good at that. So I would always just try and put it back into their world. Don't try and draw them into something they don't feel confident in. Put it back and ask them how this works in the world that they're confident in. I think that's probably, one thing we've seen. Pastors love talking about Jesus, church, and programs. You know what I mean? We're always trying to drag everybody into our world. I'm saying, how do we send Jesus into your world? And I think just putting the conversation in that path is probably pretty healthy.
Thank you.
So good. And I think that is such a great invitation into what we were talking about earlier, how I think, especially this next season for us, Ramp Church, is going to be primarily transformative for us as a core team. And even the process of working out this content to apply to our group, the people the people you journey with and that you have been journeying with for months, that process is going to be transformative for us. And I know we're at the end of our time here. Anything else, John, Tyler, Krista, that you guys would just have on your heart in posturing us or pointing us in the right direction, for the next few months?
Only thing I would say is you have to believe in the core of your being that of all the people that have ever lived in the history of the church and all of the Christians who have ever lived in Manchester, God has said that he is trusting you with his church and his mission at this time of history. That's why you're here. You are here because you're the best people in the place that you are to reach people with Jesus. And take heart, be confident. If you were meant to live at some other time, you'd be there. If you were meant to live in some other place, God would move you there. You're where you are with the people you are because you're the person he wants to use to reach those people. So don't worry if it looks like that. Don't worry if you feel that or not. Theologically, it's true. He's determined the time and place that you should live, and he wants to use you. So take heart, be faithful, and we'll be praying for you. We'll be praying that that there be fruit, that you'll get to baptize people, and you'll see people engaging with faith in ways that you haven't before, and that something will really happen in the culture of your church. So just sending you like all the love I've got from New York, and just praying that God will just strengthen your church and use this over the next few months.
Oh, incredible. Ramp
Thank
Church,
you.
can we just show some love, some Zoom love here? Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, real quick, 2 things. One big thing. You guys are guinea pigs. I don't know if you know that. So this is a gospel partnership to try to really get this course into the world. So what that means is 2 things. One is if there's something that totally like doesn't work or whatever, please tell us. Please let us know. I'm available. Krista's here to help. And secondly, the feedback from you guys is going to shape the future of this thing for so many other churches. And so please don't hold back on your thoughts, your comments, your questions, your feedback, all of it. I mean, you're one of the first churches in the world to say, hey, we want to take this and take our whole, like everybody through it. So you guys are really taking a risk. And so that's such a gift to us. And so we are just very curiously and prayerfully just standing with you to see how it goes. So just so you know the role you're playing in our world as well.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for that, Tyler. And I've been called a lot of things. I think guinea pig may be toward the top of the list there. But yeah, definitely, man, we're excited. And I was just thinking about this for you guys, and I just want to encourage you with this, that what God's done there in New York and what you have now been able to put into a program, that the fruit, the harvest field that we want to give our lives for here in this city, that part of that seed is your seed. And I just want to just declare a blessing over you guys, and want to let you know that we're going to be praying for you, here from this place, because you have filled you filled us with seed, with passion, with ideas, with equipping, and I'm so grateful. Just so grateful. Yes. So
thank you guys for your sacrifice and all the sacrifice behind getting this revelation and putting it in a beautiful package for us. Yeah. So we're really grateful.
All right, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Love.
All right, we'll see you guys later.